Hoi hoi, it's louisity again. In this video we are going to talk about the disappointing books that I read in 2024. Now, with the help of the Alphabet TBR game, I was able to read a little bit more compared to the past years. And also the catch is that I had to pick books according to prompts, so some of them weren't exactly the books that I would love, although I've been eager in reading them anyway. And I don't know if, maybe that contributed to it, but that's fine because I got to know myself as a reader. So, if you folks have been watching my channel, anything that is rated at 3.25 and lower is considered like failed or disappointed for myself. So I have 6 books to talk about in this video, so let's begin. So the first book in this video would be Honor Thyself by Daniel Steele. My rating is 3 out of 5 and the average Goodreads rating is 3.91. Now, although some of the scenes, had an impact on me, I just think that sometimes the narrative or the story tended to be like long-winded as far as I remember in terms of my reading experience. Like the context could have been communicated in a more concise manner. Like the story was in a way decent, but there were just some scenes that were just too like dense. That doesn't necessarily have to be too long. And like I said, it could have been concise. Like there were so many descriptions in the beginning, like, and then all of a sudden she was involved in a car accident. It was like they enumerated a lot of things that they've done, which it could be effective, but I felt like the way that it was written, it was quite all over the place in a bit, or a little bit too staccato. And there were times that I felt like this book, or I thought that this narrative was dragging. So yeah, I acknowledge that there are good things. Usually when I give books at 3 or 3.25 is that I do acknowledge that there are good things, but at the same time there are things that are notably need improvement. Okay, this next one, although this is not the lowest rated or my lowest rating in 2024, this isn't the book that got it. In terms of like personal disappointments, meaning like I really wanted to love this book. Like this is like the epitome of like I truly wanted to love it, but unfortunately it didn't measure up. So yeah, not the lowest rated, but I just wish that I loved this more. And maybe this is the example where I really had like high expectations just because the premise is something that I would be interested in like reading, and I thought that I was going to be able to ride along with the narrative, and that is Spirit Glass by Roshan Chokshi. Now, I love the Filipino folklore. It does talk about like the Filipino like folklore here, like the stories like Philippine mythology inspired. It talks about babaylans, Corazon's journey in becoming a babaylan. Like I appreciated all those like discussions or mentions about like the Philippine mythology or Philippine folklore and some Philippine culture. However, it came across as a glossary or a list. It's kind of like the way it came across is like, okay, these are the things that I find, or like that I found out about the Philippine like culture, like Philippine folklore, and Roshni explained those, but it could have been incorporated a little bit more in the narrative. It's really tricky. I understand that for like a standalone book. As far as I know, this is a standalone, and hopefully it remains as a standalone. Like for a standalone fantasy, yet this thick, and for like a middle grade like audience to be able to incorporate everything um, but like yeah, like I remember one of my friends said like the plot or the story lacked oomph, and that is because like just to kind of add on that, it's because it wasn't able to really mesh a great plot like the journey of Corazon becoming a babaylan with like the Philippine folklore element. So basically, the journey of babaylan is Philippine mythology inspired itself. However, like a lot of the scenes that were happening was like, let me show you like what Philippine culture is like, and there were things wherein was kind of like confusing, like in the beginning, like the way that the story went kind of like a bit zigzaggy, you know, when, and then also I was confused with like the setting. I thought that like they were really building a world that is like really in the Philippines because it came across. I understand it's a Philippine culture, but then suddenly it was in Georgia, and so I was confused a bit about this setting a little bit. Although I do understand, yes, this is a fiction book, but yeah, I felt like at the moment we were in a province in the Philippines. So I really wish that I liked it more. Although I can see, of course, the good things about it. I mean, by the way, I was able to mention my rating for this one is 2.75, and the Goodreads average rating is 4.27. So I see the good things in it. I just wish that the elements in the story could have been like synthesized in a more cohesive and not just like some sort of a textbook of what Philippine mythology or Philippine folklore or Philippine culture is. Next on this list is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. My rating is 2.5 out of 5. Please take note that all the ratings that I'm going to be mentioning here are out of 5, or 5 would be the highest. And the Goodreads average rating is 4.13. Now, I felt the spooky vibes. You know, to be fair though, I listened to this one. I felt that it was horror, it was spooky. I felt that, but it was just like really vibes, most of all. And I was able to get into the story a little bit in some parts, but some of the parts of the events weren't conveyed clearly. Like all of a sudden we are like in this place all together. Like I think the moment that you know she was like entering this like world, another like world that she was entering, if I recall correctly, and it was a bit convoluted in some of the parts. You know, I didn't think like it was something like if I was in middle grade, I was in middle grade or I was preteen. I don't know if I would be able to get into the story completely, and the ending was really sloppy. So I didn't appreciate like the story. So yeah, no. The next one is, if you've been following me on social media and my other accounts, and also if you've been watching my videos for quite some time, you folks remember that I asked like which of the hype books should I read, and this was the winner, and it made me think about certain decisions in life. And I thought that this was gonna be like my one of my worst reads, if not the worst read ever in my life. And the reason why I'm saying this a little bit earlier in the video, because of the Goodreads average rating, because it is beloved. And that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. Now, my rating for this one is 1.25 out of 5. You will hear me say ratings in the line of ones, which I've done it a bit recently, but I rarely do. But in 2024, I've done it quite a handful. So yeah, and the average, like the Goodreads average rating is 4.18, so still quite high. There were some scenes that had impact, but it wasn't enough to compensate like my entire reading experience. It was very cyclical. A lot of the things that either Henry or Abby were talking about just didn't make sense to the overall narrative, to the overall like journey that she had for like 3 centuries or almost 4 centuries. And it was just like really dragging, and I'm like, there was just something about like the narrative that, like, there was just like a wall between the narrative and of course me as a reader. There was just something that's like sort of gatekeeping it, that it wasn't able to really convey like this, because sometimes like a lot of context is wonderful to read if it was like executed properly, if if it was able to immerse somebody in like the narrative or the world, but it wasn't able to do that. And honestly, the whole story, it could have just been a short story, not even a novella, because just as how like repetitive and how it is, because it's like, okay, we get to know Addie, who everyone that she meets forgets about her, and then she suddenly meets a person who remembers her, and she's kind of like tugging between two lovers. And also the lover is somebody that she made a pact about, like living like an immortal life, and then she decides to choose love over like immortality, which could have just been like a short story, not even a novella, honestly. It was just so dragging. And also like the two timelines, like the 18th and 19th century and like the 2010s, basically the flashback of it, just like they could have just been like two different novels, and that is such a tricky thing to do. One of the things I realized this year, also from watching booktube videos about books that disappointed or that were the worst books that people read, is that time like switching or dual timeline point of views are very difficult to execute, because at some point there has to be a way to kind of like make it make sense, or it doesn't like it, what, for dual timelines, it didn't like, for this narrative, for this novel, for Invisible Life of Abby LaRue, it didn't intrigue me how these two like timelines were related. That's how I also felt with Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, and I do understand that is a series, but it didn't give me that intrigue. It's kind of like, if it doesn't give you intrigue, it can come across as that these stories should be set as individual novels, which is, a tricky thing to do as an author. And there were elements that could have been seen in like a literary fiction work. I don't know if that's what V. Schwab was going for. Some people thought like she was just simply writing off of her experience, and like basically the whole intent or the goal was kind of vague, because it does come like, when I was reading this story, it is something that I would sometimes read in literary fiction, like a quirky character. She was like running, and all that, but it didn't measure up. It missed like the point, because there was nothing like profound about it. And with literary fiction, or if you're gonna come across as like a literary fiction or like magical realism, kind of like or speculative fiction, there has to be some sort of profound things that go with it. And it just didn't, like, it was just like there was nothing substantial about how the overall like story was. If this was a short story, maybe, but as a novel, it was just poorly executed. And before we proceed in the next one, it made me like contemplate about some decisions, like, because that was like a hype book, and at the same time that was the winner in the survey that I did. And this was like the second time that it happened that the winner of my polls ended up really a dreadful read. It was like really dreadful. Together with like Six of Crows by Lee Bardugo. Like that was a winner of a bookish survey that I did, but it was dreadful. It was dreadful. And it makes me now think if I should do this, but at the same time, the Heroes of the Olympus series is also a winner, and I ended up like loving the series overall. So yes, it made me think about like a lot of the books that are hyped are just really like bad for me and not in accordance to my taste. But who knows? I might still be able to do these like surveys to see what is out there. And yeah, but moving on. So the next book, the fifth book that disappointed me, one of like my worst reads, would have to be We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. And it has the same rating, like it has the same rating for me with compared to Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. What I mean is my rating is 1.25 out of 5, and the Goodreads average rating is 3.66. That's why Invisible Life of Addie LaRue came before, and then We Were Liars next. Also, narrative is like no substance. It came across as like an anthology or like a diary of the main character. There was no mystery or overall plot. Like, you know, the whole title or even like the synopsis that I would read in Goodreads didn't really make sense. The only one that unleashed emotion out of this novel is that the grandfather who is racist. Like that was the only one that's like that like kept me awake in terms of reading this novel, but like the scenes here, it was just like teenagers that were just being experimental, which is, you know, it's not a bad thing as a novel itself, but in terms of like the for like a thriller or like a mystery novel, it just doesn't measure up. And like it's just so like there's just no substance. It's just like it's like food with like it's just really bland. There wasn't anything about the narrative that was really gonna hit you other than like the things that I mentioned. And it's funny because I didn't realize the twist until my friend told me. Like they were apparently ghosts, and I didn't realize that until my friend mentioned that. So yes, like the writing just didn't work out for me, and it does kind of like, you know, usually with lower rated books I tend to kind of like enjoy them. I think so though, or maybe I may be wrong, because like this was relatively hyped, but there are a handful of people that did not like it, and I'm kind of like in the I did not like it in a more what you call this, in the more of a majority, you know, kind of sense. And the last and definitely the least, and this is the worst book that I've read in 2024, and that is Circe by Madeline Miller. Now, I gave this 1 out of 5, and the Goodreads average rating, though, is 4.23, which is, still quite high. I thought it was a bit lower, but you know what? This is like the worst book that I've ever read in my entire life. It's just the worst book that I've ever read. And it's just filled with vibes. Like the beginning, but like after like the first few chapters, it just went downhill. Like the direction of the narrative was vague or did not exist at all, you know, because like they said this was just like a commentary about Circe, and it was just like, it was just like, there was nothing profound about it. Like, it didn't unleash anything out of me. And there was Madeline's writing for me is just not working. I realize that. Like it's just not. It's just horrendous. Because I read Song of Achilles, that was kind of like my main issue with majority of the novel, and I gave that like 2 out of 5 because towards like the end, you know, it started unleashing emotions out of me, because of the son of the was it of yeah the son of Achilles, um, if I got it correctly, because Patroclus is like the other character, but yeah, the ending or like the latter parts unleashed emotions out of me. That's why I did kind of like increase the rating. Although I realized that the 2 out of 5 might have been nice, but even if I gave it like 1.5 or 1.75, it's going to end up 2 out of 5 in Goodreads anyway. Because I round up ratings. By the way, if it's 0.5 or 0.75, and I round down if it's 0.25. But yeah, I read that, I didn't like it, and I know that a lot of the people who loved Song of Achilles didn't really like Cersei, or, felt flat, or was disappointed, or like, it didn't meet their expectations. And I thought I was gonna be kind of like on the other side, because I tend to be like that. Like when people love something, I tend to like not really enjoy, and if people do not really enjoy something, I tend to enjoy. Emergency Contact, for one, is one of them, and I think Permanent Record, like basically Mary H.K. Chueh's like books, and unfortunately, I was kind of like with those people that also did like Cersei. Like I deplore this book, like way more than Song of Achilles, because it was just like it was horrendous. It was horrible. It was like dragging, kind of like also with Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, but with Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, there were some like things that were like kind of like glimmering there. This one, nothing. It was like, and now I don't know if it is because it's Greek mythology, because Percy Jackson, Heroes of the Olympus, there's Greek mythology, and I'm enjoying it. But like with this one, like no, like I'm not gonna read Madeline Miller again. I know, I think that if this statement will change, it's for really deep reasons why I would decide to read a Madeline Miller book again. But like, I'm gonna hold myself accountable for this one, because I know that there are other books that I can read. Maybe I'll try other authors that write, Greek mythology inspired books, like Jennifer Saint, and who knows if I'll appreciate them more. Hopefully, but yeah, with Madeline Miller, I'm done. I'm done. Cersei by Madeline Miller is the worst book that I read in 2024, and the worst book that I read in my life. Okay, so there is one more. Now, this is actually a reread. Okay, so yeah. And it is The Almost Moon by Alice Bold. Now, my rating is 2 out of 5, and honestly, when I saw the Goodreads average rating, I wasn't surprised. It wasn't like too far from like what I've thought, and it seems that a handful of people didn't like it as well. Now, the average Goodreads rating of The Almost Moon by Alice Bold is 2.72, and when I decided to do a reread of this one, to reread this one, I was having my hopes high, because usually with rereads, I tend to appreciate them more the second time that I read them, and it tends to like make me more open about the narratives and discover about things it's going to, make me contemplate. Basically, I would find the book more thought-provoking. And also because of the premise of the story, it seems interesting. But I was just like thinking, why do some folks found this dull? And yeah, in a way, I did find it dull in the beginning. I think I gave this before like 3 out of 5. And then when I reread it, I, of course, felt like the spooky vibes. or like sort of, the dark, morbid vibes that it had, with the beginning. If you folks read this, you would know what I mean. And I kind of get what Alice is trying to do with depicting the main character's experiences with her mother, and at the same time it wasn't flushed out or executed clearly or vividly. So yeah, like it had things that are powerful, that are working, but overall it was still a failure. Feel free to comment down below your thoughts about these books that I mentioned, or feel free to share about your worst or disappointing books read in 2024. And if you've made it this far, leave a ring emoji. Despite this video being about disappointing books read, I hope you still folks enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Also, click that subscribe button and hit that little bell icon somewhere down there to keep yourselves posted about my videos. And I'll also put down links and handles of my social media accounts, so feel free to check me out and follow me there and support me there as well. As always, thank you so much for watching. Always be thankful and unleash the reader in you. Bye, y'all.